I think one of the most exciting things for me over the last few years filmmaking is undoubtedly the intro, and to some extent the outro, but mostly the intro of a film. Because if we're talking about a character, there are a lot of questions that we have to ask. What do we know about this person that is the most pivotal and important thing to show at the very front? And if it's about an event or a gathering, do we start it at the beginning? Do we start it at the middle? Do we wait until everybody's left and start the film there? There are a lot of different ways that we can approach both the start and end of a film. And one of the things that is perhaps even more important is this idea of how do we close the gap between the intro and the outro? How do we make them feel like they're part of one cohesive whole? Because in the types of films that I usually end up working on, especially when they're documentary, we're talking about 10 to 15 to 20 minutes in length, and that's a short period of time for a full film. And so in that sense, it's crucial to have a connection between the beginning and the end, to make it feel like the film is something greater, like it's not just a short piece, but it can stand on its own. The title of this video is The Importance of Intro and Outro, but maybe more appropriately, it's the importance of tying those things together. And this can be done in a few different ways, but one of them might be metaphorical. If we're starting an argument at the beginning of the film, we might choose to end it, of course, at the very last moments. It can also be on a literal sense. If we're starting the film in one location, we might choose to end it at the same location because this creates a feeling of nostalgia. The viewer has seen this before, so it almost makes them feel like they've been along for the journey. Now, especially when it comes down to location, one of the recent projects that I had the opportunity to work on, I actually used this method for the beginning and the end. I traveled a bit across Europe to film a rock documentary, which was one of the first times that I've ever done anything like that. And I very much decided to focus on how I was going to start and end this film based on what I felt was most monumental. And in this case, it was location. It was the first concert. Funnily enough, although the band toured around Bulgaria and a bit in the Netherlands and Germany, the most emblematic, the biggest concert was at the very beginning in Varna, our seaside capital here in Bulgaria. And it was perfect for an intro because you're backstage and everyone's anxious and people are gathering together and having this camaraderie before they go out on stage, and it's their first time playing in front of a really big live audience. And so the start was very much this close-knit group. It was backstage. You get a bit of a glimpse of the audience, of course, but it was more so the interaction backstage, everyone hugging together, getting ready, being surprised when it's time to actually go on stage, and then the film starts.
Last one to finish is the winner.
Good luck.
Cheers, good luck. All right, lovely. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
That was fast.
And the rest of the film, of course, follows the band, whether that's through the first practice rehearsals they had, going to interviews, going to the Netherlands and Germany, and playing in a lot of different venues. But at the very end, we come back to where all the excitement really first started, which was at the first concert. And actually, I was pretty lucky with this because interviewing the person who created the band, who writes the music, they spoke about the fact that really Varna for them, the first concert, was the most important, but not just because it was the biggest, but also because that's where they grew up and that's where they had friends and family come together to watch the concert. So luckily enough, we had two reasons for going back to Varna. But the key thing here is having this feeling of going on a journey, traveling across Europe, but then reminding yourself of that first big concert and almost experiencing a nostalgia for where it all really started. Another way in which I focused on intro and outro was in a recent project that I filmed for Cannes in Bulgaria that also ended up making its way to Cannes in Europe. But this was about a very different topic. It was about culture, about a tradition here in Bulgaria where villagers across the country dress in masks and costumes to ward off evil spirits and demons at the start of the new year. And actually the film starts and ends at the very last event that I had the opportunity to film. And I was crammed into the back of this van trying to get this low-angle shot as all of the masks and the costumes were being handed out to the rest of the villagers. And watching it, you get the feeling that something is starting, but you don't know what exactly. And right when you feel that there's about to be some sort of progress in the back of this van, the film cuts and we start introducing the village slowly, and the mayor, who is one of the main characters, and the rest of the villagers who participate in the film or have stories around this tradition. And so the film at one point started to be about a lot more than just this event. It started to be about the preservation of culture and what happens when villages are disappearing. How do you keep something going? What is there to learn from the past? And one of the last interviews in the film was of a grandmother from the village who spoke about the fact that this tradition needs to keep on going because that's the only way that the new generation of kids growing up today will know about the struggles of the past and what everyone's been through. And so in that sense, the end of the film, after all these heavy topics and discussions around disappearing villages and the disappearance of cultural identity, we come back to this van that the film started with. And now we realize that this is actually members of the village getting ready to head out and start the last event of the year. But it's about something more than location in this case, because there's an argument as well. Right after the grandmother speaks about the disappearance of these traditions, we have the villager finally exiting the van and going to participate in the event. And in that sense, it gives this sense of hope that things will keep on going and that no matter how much things change over time, there always will be those people that are going to preserve these traditions and keep them alive. And one of the last projects that I'll talk about is actually about India, about one of the largest free traveling medical camps in the western part of the country. Now, this camp focuses on a lot of different things. It brings doctors together from the largest town in the area to provide all sorts of healthcare services, but perhaps most importantly, it's there to offer free cataract operations and restoring sight to people who were losing it up until that point.
You just see all these people and they're real and they exist. And the distance is very small. It just takes a few people from here to go out to them and make that difference.
And in that sense, it felt crucial to start the film in this way as well. One of the first scenes, we see a patient sitting on a chair and getting their eyes checked. It seems like a routine check where they're asked to identify letters and numbers on the board. And then suddenly we cut to another shot where we see the individual's hands and it's clear that they're nervous. And as the camera slowly pans up, we realize that they're going blind. Then the shot pans back. We get introduced to the town itself, a lot of the doctors, a lot of the previous patients that have had cataract operations, a lot of the volunteers from the organization that is helping organize all of this, before finally, at the end of the film, getting back to our initial character, who was featured in the very opening scenes of the film. But now, we don't see them nervous, we don't see them waiting for the operation, but we actually see them undergoing it. I had the opportunity to actually be in the operating room as the cataracts were removed, and then seeing the individual bandaged and waiting for their sight to restore. And so in that sense, maybe it's a bit cliche, but really the end here is about something much more than just following a patient. It's an idea of hope. In the beginning, what seems like a hopeless situation with somebody sitting at the edge of a bed not being able to see actually is slowly unfolded throughout the film as we're told the story of this medical camp that is restoring sight. And towards the end, the mood, the music that's used, the ambience changes completely.
And a stronger family then affects the community. If the community gets stronger, it'll affect the whole region, and of course then eventually, hopefully the ripples will go out into a national level and maybe even international level, who knows.
So that's it. 3 short examples of why I think that intro and outro are crucial to every film. Whether you're focusing on a story of culture and the dying of a tradition, or you're focused on healthcare and the importance, especially for rural villages, or you're focused on a rock concert and these dreams that are coming true for one individual or many people, it's always important to think about how do we start this? Where was the most impactful part of all of this? And how do we want to end it? And that's something that I'm definitely trying to do more and more of the different projects that I'm working on now. But sometimes it's really just a gut feeling. It's when you're in the middle of a situation and you see something happening and you know that this is important. Maybe you haven't been there for a very long time, but it feels emblematic. And those are the moments that we should really focus on and capture to the full extent.